The park bench, cool and rough beneath Lily's bare calves, bore the scars of chipped paint. Sunlight, fractured by the ancient oak's canopy, danced across the worn cover of her notebook. She hugged it fiercely, the frayed edges pressing into her ribs. More than mere paper, it was a sanctuary of secrets, a silent witness in a world that often roared with indifference. Her small fingers traced the faded crayon drawing on its face. A crooked house, smoke curling from its chimney, a long-ago vision of safety. A shiver, unrelated to the gentle breeze, traced its way down her spine. The image of Mrs. Gable's house, her current residence, materialized in her mind. From the outside, it was a picture of suburban normalcy, with its manicured lawn and window boxes overflowing with vibrant petunias. Inside, however, a different reality unfolded. One evening, not long after her arrival, hushed voices had pulled Lily from sleep, peeking through the crack in the living room door. She'd seen Mrs. Gable, her usual sweet smile replaced by a taut, serious mask, counting stacks of money. Opposite her sat a heavily built man with a face like crumpled parchment, a stranger Lily had never encountered. Mrs. Gable's nervous glances toward the hallway had tightened a knot in Lily's stomach. He'd slid a small, clear bag across the coffee table. Definitely not candy, Lily knew, as Mrs. Gable quickly secreted it into a hidden wall compartment. The air had grown heavy, thick with a tension even a child could perceive. Lily had scurried back to bed, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Weeks later, another foster child arrived, Maya. Smaller than Lily, Maya possessed eyes that held a permanent tremor of fear. Lily had attempted friendship, offering a shared crayon and a half-eaten biscuit. But Maya's stay was fleeting. One morning, she was simply gone. Mrs. Gable, with a dramatic sigh and a shake of her head, explained that Maya had been rehomed to a family who could better meet her needs. Lily hadn't believed a word. Later that day, she overheard Mrs. Gable on the phone, her voice lowered, discussing the new shipment and making arrangements. The words had twisted in Lily's gut. Maya's terrified eyes a haunting specter. Of course, Lily had tried to tell someone. The social worker, Ms. Jenkins, a kind-faced woman who visited monthly and smelled faintly of lavender, was her initial confidant. Mrs. Gable sometimes has men over, Lily began, but Mrs. Gable, always hovering, quickly interjected with a saccharine smile. Oh, Lily just means my brother-in-law. Bless his heart. He pops by to fix the leaky faucet. Such a dear man. Ms. Jenkins offered Mrs. Gable a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then turned back to Lily, her attention already drifting to the next item on her checklist. No one truly listened. They saw the immaculate house, the perfectly baked cookies, the carefully constructed narrative of devotion. They saw a quiet, sometimes withdrawn, little girl, and dismissed her concerns as a child's overactive imagination. That's when the notebook transformed into her refuge, her quiet weapon. She pulled a stubby pencil, its lead worn to a nub, from her pocket. Carefully, she opened the notebook to a fresh page. Her small fingers, smudged with ink and dirt, pressed the lead to the paper. The date, May 12th. Then in her best cursive, Maya gone. Mrs. Gable said, "Rehomed." Lies. A small, sad face, its eyes wide and tearful, materialized beside the words. Beneath it, a new entry. Just yesterday, she had witnessed it again. A different man this time, but the same swift exchange of money and a small package. He'd left a folded piece of paper on the table. Lily, feigning to tie her shoe, subtly nudged it with her foot, glimpsing a partial address and a name. Mr. Thorne, Elmwood Saint. She quickly scrawled it down, adding a detailed drawing of the man's distinctive silver watch, a dragon etched onto its face. She didn't grasp its full significance, or Mr. Thorne's identity, but she knew it was another fragment of the puzzle, another thread in Mrs. Gable's tangled web. Flipping back through the pages, each was a testament to her silent vigilance. Names, dates, addresses, descriptions. Mr. Henderson, May 3rd red truck, gave Mrs. Gable big envelope. Next to it, a stick figure Mr. Henderson, complete with bushy mustache and the specific pattern on his baseball cap. Boxes in basement, dark, smell funny. Mrs. Gable locks door when she goes down. A crude sketch of a padlocked door. There were entries about the children, too. The parade of brief stays and departures, shrouded in Mrs. Gable's practiced euphemisms. Lily drew their faces from memory, striving to capture their fleeting presence. Each drawing was a silent pledge. She wouldn't forget them, even if no one else seemed to care. She closed the notebook, the tiny guardian of truth, its rough paper comforting in her hands, a solid counterweight to her fear. It was her secret keeper, holding all the unspoken horrors, all the moments she instinctively knew were wrong. She didn't fully comprehend the scope of her documentation, but its importance resonated within her. She knew that someday, somehow, these words and drawings would find meaning for someone who would finally listen. A gust of wind rustled the oak leaves, and Lily pulled her knees closer. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Soon, she would return to Mrs. Gable's house, to the carefully constructed facade. But for now, on this park bench, her notebook clutched tight, Lily felt a flicker of something rare. A quiet, determined hope. The truth lay in her hands, and one day, she believed, it would be unleashed. A glimmer of hope. The late afternoon sun, a dying ember in the sky, stretched long, spectral shadows across the overgrown park. Lily, perched on a splintered bench, knees hugged to her chest, chin resting on bony forearms. She was a wisp of a girl, almost swallowed by the rustling leaves and the distant shouts of playing children. Her gaze, though, wasn't on their carefree games, but fixed on a formidable silhouette beneath the ancient oak at the park's far end. He was a titan of a man, clad in worn leather that seemed to drink the fading light. A faded denim vest, emblazoned with a snarling bulldog, strained across his expansive back. His motorcycle, a gleaming brute of chrome and black, idled beside him, its low rumble a primal heartbeat in the quiet air. Rex, she'd overheard Mrs. Gable sneer once. Rex, Bulldog O'Malley. He loomed like a nightmare made flesh, all dense muscle and intricate tattoos, his face a weathered map of scars and sun-baked lines. A cigarette glowed between his fingers, its cherry a defiant spark in the deepening twilight. Every instinct screamed at Lily to flee, to retreat to the deceptively neat house that felt more like a cage. Rex embodied pure, unadulterated danger, the very kind of man Mrs. Gable actively cultivated with her hushed phone calls and late-night whispers. Yet, as Lily observed him, a different emotion, fragile but insistent, began to unfurl in her chest. He sat alone, a solitary sentinel, his eyes sweeping the park with an almost protective intensity. There was a raw honesty about him, a lack of artifice that, paradoxically, made him seem less menacing than Mrs. Gable's slick, calculating smile. He was the bogeyman of adult warnings, the figure you instinctively avoided. But in Lily's fractured reality, where safe adults had consistently failed her, he represented something else entirely, a final gambit, a wild, improbable throw of the dice, a desperate, flickering ember of hope in the suffocating darkness. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a trapped bird fluttering wildly. Her palms grew slick, and a tremor started in her knees. What if he scoffed? What if he betrayed her to Mrs. Gable? What if he was just another cog in the shadowy machinery yonder that had swallowed Maya and so many others? The thoughts swirled, cold and sharp, threatening to extinguish the fragile hope. But then Maya's face surfaced in her mind. Her bright, trusting eyes, the way she'd hugged Lily goodbye, oblivious to the grim fate awaiting her. And the other children, their names meticulously catalogued in the worn notebook clutched in Lily's lap. The crushing weight of their lost laughter, their unheard cries, settled heavily on her small shoulders. She couldn't allow it to happen again. She couldn't remain silent. Not anymore. This man, this terrifying, imposing figure, was her singular chance. He was an outsider, a renegade, perhaps even a monster in some eyes. But Lily had learned that monsters often wore the most respectable masks. And sometimes, just sometimes, salvation could be found in the most unlikely of sanctuaries. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Lily pushed herself off the bench. Her legs felt like jelly, each step a monumental effort. The notebook, her silent weapon, her meticulously gathered truth, was pressed tight against her chest, its worn cover a familiar anchor. Her gaze remained riveted on Rex, a tiny moth drawn to a powerful, perilous flame. The distance seemed vast, stretching like an endless chasm. Every rustle of leaves, every distant cry seemed amplified, mocking her temerity. Her worn sneakers scuffed softly on the gravel path. She could feel his presence growing stronger, more defined with each hesitant step. The scent of his cigarette, a faint whiff of leather and exhaust, drifted towards her. She imagined his eyes, which she hadn't yet clearly seen, turning to her, scrutinizing her small, determined form. Would he be furious, baffled, indifferent? The possibilities gnawed at her, but she forced them down. There was no turning back now. The glimmer of hope, though faint, had ignited a fire in her belly, propelling her forward. She was a tiny skiff against a powerful current, but she was moving. And for the first time in a long time, Lily felt a fragile sense of purpose. Her feet carried her closer, closer to the man who might be her undoing or her deliverance. The unveiling. Lily's small hand, smudged with what looked like dried ink, trembled as she extended the worn notebook. It was a simple composition book, its black and white marbled cover faded and peeling at the corners, held together by a single, fraying rubber band. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and distant exhaust fumes, seemed to press in on them, amplifying the silence between the growling man and the terrified child. Rex's gaze, initially fixed on her face, flickered down to the offered item. His brow, usually a solid line of unyielding resolve, furrowed slightly. He hadn't expected an offering, certainly not a school notebook. A weapon, perhaps, or a plea for spare change, but not this. His large hand, scarred and calloused from years of hard living, moved slowly, deliberately, as if approaching a skittish bird. He didn't snatch it, didn't demand it. Instead, his fingers brushed against hers, surprisingly gentle, as he took the slim volume. The faint warmth of Lily's touch lingered on the cover. Rex's eyes, the color of storm clouds, scanned the exterior. No title, no owner's name, just the faint imprint of countless small fingers. He peeled back the rubber band, its worn elastic snapping softly against the cardboard. A wave of apprehension, cold and unexpected, washed over him. This wasn't a homework assignment. He opened it to the first page. The paper was cream-colored, lined, and filled with neat, almost painstakingly careful script. Child's handwriting, without a doubt, but surprisingly legible, each letter meticulously formed. The words, however, were anything but childlike. His eyes, accustomed to scanning invoices, manifestos, or the quick shorthand of his club's ledgers, moved across the page. Dates stood out first, stark and precise. October 12th, November 3rd, December 1st. Below each date, a series of observations etched in careful detail. He read of hushed conversations in the dead of night, of strange cars pulling up to Mrs. Gable's house, their engines idling like predatory beasts. He read of shadows moving through the darkened hallways, of unfamiliar faces and whispered commands. The careful phrasing, the almost clinical detachment of the descriptions, only served to amplify the horror. Lily wasn't sensationalizing. She was documenting, recording facts as she understood them, with an almost unnerving precision. His jaw, usually set in a permanent scowl, began to clench, a muscle in his cheek twitching almost imperceptibly. The sunlight, filtering through the sparse branches overhead, seemed to dim, casting the words in a more sinister light. He turned a page, then another. The narrative deepened, became more personal. Though still maintaining that chilling objectivity, he read of children, younger than Lily, their names appearing like haunting echoes: Maya, Timmy, Sarah. He read of their disappearances, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, under the watchful, malevolent eye of Mrs. Gable. Lily had noted their fear, their tears, their forced smiles upon return. She had even attempted to describe the vague, unsettling scent that clung to them afterward. Something cloying and artificial, like sickly sweet medicine and stale perfume. A tremor ran through Rex's large frame, a reaction he hadn't felt in years. He'd seen his share of depravity, face-down men capable of unspeakable acts. But this was different. This was the raw, unvarnished testimony of a child, a silent scream captured on paper. The sheer innocence of the hand that had written these horrors made them all the more potent, all the more sickening. His fingers, still holding the notebook, tightened almost imperceptibly. His gaze, usually hard and unyielding, softened, though a fire, cold and dangerous, began to ignite deep within their depths. He looked up, his eyes finding Lily's. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. But her eyes, wide and unwavering, held a desperate plea, a silent challenge. She had delivered her truth, her burden. Now, It was his to bear. The noise of the city, once a dull drone, now seemed to fade into the background. The park, the pigeons, the distant laughter of other children, all became irrelevant. There was only the girl, the notebook, and the horrifying reality it contained. Rex closed the book slowly, carefully, as if handling something infinitely fragile and immensely powerful. The rough leather of his vest felt suddenly heavy. His tattoos, once symbols of defiance, now seemed to mock him with their inertness. This wasn't a street fight or a turf war. This was something far darker, far more insidious, and it demanded a different kind of strength, a different kind of justice. He looked at Lily, his expression a complicated mix of shock and a nascent, terrifying resolve. The game had just changed. A horrifying truth. Rex's calloused thumb grazed the worn cover of the notebook, a stark contrast to the delicate, almost impossibly neat handwriting inside. He turned to a new page, the ink a faded blue, almost swallowed by the cheap paper. June 14th. Mikey, age 7. Mrs. Gable said he was troublesome, gave him a special medicine. His eyes looked like glass marbles after. Came back different, quiet, didn't laugh anymore. A shiver, cold and sharp, traced its way down Rex's spine. He flipped another page. July 3rd. Sarah, age 9. Mrs. Gable took her to a special doctor at night. Sarah cried, came back with new bruises, said not to tell. Her drawings used to be flowers. Now they're dark shapes. Rex's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He could feel Lily's gaze on him, a silent, unwavering pressure. He didn't look up, afraid of what his eyes might betray, afraid of seeing the truth reflected in hers. He continued to read, the entries a horrifying litany. Names, dates, snippets of conversations Lily had overheard, descriptions of hushed car doors, slamming in the dead of night, the scent of chemicals, children returning with vacant stares and empty smiles. Each entry was a precise, chillingly objective record. Lily hadn't sensationalized, hadn't added emotional flourishes. She had simply documented, like a tiny, terrified archivist of horrors. There were details of strange men visiting Mrs. Gable's house, men with shiny shoes and cold eyes, descriptions of vans with tinted windows, always arriving after dark, always leaving before dawn. She'd even noted the license plate numbers, scrawled painstakingly at the bottom of several pages. Rex mentally cross-referenced them with the vehicles he'd seen near the Gable house himself. The ones that had always raised a prickle of unease. They matched. He saw the pattern emerging, stark and undeniable. Not just a few isolated incidents of abuse, but a meticulously organized system. The special medicine, the special doctors, the changes in the children. It all pointed to something far more sinister than simple neglect, or even isolated physical harm. This was trafficking. The children were being drugged, taken, used, and then returned, broken. The meticulous detail in Lily's observations, the repeated phrases about the children being different upon their return, confirmed his terrible suspicion. This wasn't just a bad foster home. It was a node in a much larger, darker network. A slow, burning fury began to smolder in Rex's gut, a heat that spread through his chest. He'd seen plenty of ugliness in his life, been party to a fair share of it, but this was a different kind of evil. It preyed on the most vulnerable, stole their innocence, and then discarded them. He reached an entry that made his breath catch. August 2nd. Tommy, age 5. Mrs. Gable said he was too much trouble. Van came. Tommy cried. Mrs. Gable laughed. He didn't come back. No return. That meant Tommy was gone. Permanently. The implications hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just abuse. It was abduction. Possibly murder. The scale of it, meticulously laid out in this small, worn notebook, was staggering. Lily hadn't just witnessed fragmented events. She had compiled a comprehensive dossier. This wasn't local. It had to be a significant operation, spanning jurisdictions, perhaps even state lines. Rex slowly closed the notebook, the soft thud echoing in the sudden silence of the clubhouse. The weight of it in his hands felt immense, a small, fragile vessel, holding an ocean of suffering. He finally lifted his gaze to Lily. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt, her eyes wide and luminous in the dim light, watching him with an unnerving intensity. They held no judgment, only a profound, heartbreaking understanding. She'd lived this. She'd seen it all, processed it, and in her own quiet, brave way, decided to fight back. She was just a child, yet she had faced down a monster and meticulously documented its crimes. driven by a courage that shamed him. The thought of the terror she must have endured, the burden of witnessing such horrors alone, twisted his gut. "Lily," he said, his voice rougher than he intended, "do you understand what you've given me?" She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "It's the truth, Rex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They hurt them, and no one else would listen." In that moment, Rex O'Malley, known as Bulldog to those who feared him, felt a humbling wave of respect, raw and fierce. This quiet child, with her worn notebook and unwavering moral compass, had delivered evidence that could shatter lives and expose an evil so profound it made his blood run cold. And she had entrusted it to him. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that he now carried a responsibility far greater than any club business, any rivalry, any personal vendetta. He had to act. For Tommy, for Sarah, for Mikey, for Lily, and for every other child whose name was etched into the pages of this horrifying truth. Rallying the pack, the notebook lay open on the worn kitchen table, each page a fresh cut. Rex's jaw was tight, his gaze fixed on the meticulous scrawl. The sheer scale of it, the chilling detail, made his stomach clench. This wasn't just a bad foster home. It was a goddamn factory of misery. He slammed the cover shut, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the small apartment. He didn't need to read another word. He knew enough. He snatched his phone from the counter, his fingers flying across the keypad. The first call went to Spike. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "What's up, Bulldog? You sound like you just wrestled a bear and lost." "Worse," Rex grunted, his voice a low rumble. "Get everyone. Park, now, and tell them to bring their game faces. This ain't no joyride." A pause, then Spike's tone shifted, losing its easygoing edge. "How bad?" "Bad enough to make your blood run cold, Spike. Just get him here." He hung up before Spike could ask more questions, then dialed another number, and another. Each conversation was brief, the urgency in his voice cutting through any initial levity. There was a problem, a big one, and it involved kids. That was all they needed to hear. Loyalty ran deep in their club, especially when it came to protecting the innocent. Lily, who had been perched on the edge of the sofa watching him with wide, solemn eyes, flinched slightly at his intensity. Are they going to believe it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rex turned to her, his harsh expression softening slightly. "They'll believe it, kid. They always do when it matters." He picked up the notebook, holding it out to her. "This is your proof, and it's solid." He paced the small living room, the weight of the information settling heavily on him. He had seen a lot in his life, but the systematic exploitation of children, hidden in plain sight, was a new low. His mind was already racing, piecing together a plan, even as a cold anger began to simmer beneath his calm exterior. Within 20 minutes, the rumble of engines began to vibrate through the ground. A single Harley, then another, then a chorus of throaty roars announced their arrival. Lily's head snapped towards the window, her eyes widening at the sight of the gleaming chrome and black leather. Rex nodded towards the door. "That's them." He led Lily out, the cool evening air doing little to douse the fire in his gut. The park, usually quiet at this hour, was now a scene of subdued power. 5 motorcycles, polished and imposing, were parked in a neat semicircle. Their riders, clad in the familiar leather vests, emblazoned with their club's insignia, stood beside them, a formidable group. Spike, a lanky man with a neatly trimmed beard and shrewd eyes, was the first to step forward. "What's the emergency, Bulldog?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over Rex, then lingering on the small, pale girl clutching a notebook tightly to her chest. The other members, Bear, a hulking figure with a gentle demeanor, Snake, lean and watchful, and Ace, whose quick wit was matched only by his quick hands, nodded their greetings, their expression serious. The usual banter was absent. They could sense the gravity of the situation. Rex placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, a gesture that was both protective and reassuring. "This is Lily," he introduced, his voice carrying surprising softness. "And she's got a story that needs to be heard." He looked at his friends, his gaze hardening. "A story that's going to make us all sick to our stomachs, but a story we have to act on." He gestured for them to gather closer, leading them to a picnic table under a lone towering oak. Lily sat down carefully, placing the notebook on the worn wood. The bikers leaned in, their faces grim, their eyes fixed on Rex. The rumble of distant city traffic was the only sound breaking the tense silence. "Lily here," Rex began, his voice low and steady, "has been living in a foster home. A woman named Mrs. Gable runs it." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "But it's not a home. It's a front for something rotten." He picked up the notebook, opening it to a random page. Lily, being smarter and braver than most adults I know, started writing things down. Things she saw, things she heard, things that weren't right. He flipped through the pages, revealing the careful handwriting, the dates, the names, the disturbing descriptions. She documented children being drugged, abused, children being taken away, sometimes never to be seen again. She saw men coming and going, whispered conversations about packages and deliveries. "This," he tapped the page with a thick finger, "is a logs of child trafficking, of abuse, of kids being sold off like cattle." A collective gasp rippled through the group. Spike's jaw dropped, and Bear's huge hands clenched into fists. Snake's eyes narrowed to slits, and Ace's face, usually quick to smile, was etched with pure disgust. "A social worker dismissed her." Lily's voice was a whisper, but it cut through the shocked silence. "She said I had an overactive imagination." Rex's eyes, usually as hard as granite, now held a dangerous glint. "She wasn't imagining anything. This isn't a story, boys. This is evidence. Hard, undeniable evidence that a monster is preying on innocent children, right under everyone's noses." He looked at each of them, his gaze unwavering. "And we're going to stop her." The air crackled with a new kind of energy. The initial shock was quickly replaced by a simmering rage, a shared sense of outrage that transcended their usual code. This wasn't about territory or loyalty to their own. This was about justice, pure and unadulterated. This was about children. And for this pack, that was the strongest rallying cry of all, the club's decision. A stifling quiet gripped the garage, broken only by the faint hum of a distant refrigerator. Each man, a testament to life's brutal sculpting, sat riveted, their gazes locked on Lily's open notebook. The easy laughter, the clinking of bottles, the relaxed camaraderie of moments past had evaporated, replaced by a grim tableau. Rex had read aloud, his voice a low, furious rumble. The meticulous entries detailing disappearances, unfamiliar men, hushed transactions, and Lily's own chilling observations. Spike, usually quick with a retort, merely stared at a page describing a boy named Michael, whose laughter had been cruelly silenced after a weekend visit from a nice man in a shiny car. A pulse hammered visibly in his temple. Bear, whose massive frame typically exuded a genial strength, now had white-knuckled fists clenched tight. Snake, the perpetual stoic, betrayed his internal storm with a solitary muscle twitching in his jaw. Even Ace, often cloaked in detached amusement, appeared utterly sickened. Lily, perched on a workbench stool, absorbed their reactions. Her small hands remained tightly clasped, her eyes sweeping across each hardened face. She'd witnessed anger before, felt Mrs. Gable's sharp sting, but this was different. This was a slow-burning, perilous inferno, fueled by the profound injustice she had painstakingly chronicled. With a soft thud that reverberated like a pistol shot in the stillness, Rex closed the notebook. He looked up, his usually sharp, analytical eyes now blazing with raw indignation. "This isn't just neglect. This isn't even simply a bad foster parent," he growled, his voice a dangerous undertone. "This is systematic. This is trafficking." A collective gasp rippled through the group. The word, a leaden weight, hung in the air, its horrific implications solidifying the nightmare now laid bare. Spike finally shattered the silence, his voice raspy. "Lily, you witnessed all this yourself?" His eyes, typically crinkling with good humor, were now serious, probing. Lily nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible movement. "I wrote everything down," she whispered, her voice a threadbare sound, when no one would listen. "And your social worker?" Snake asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. "She said I had an overactive imagination," Lily replied, her gaze dropping to her hands. The memory visibly stung. A fresh wave of fury surged through the men. "Overactive imagination!" Bear roared, slamming a fist onto the table, making the glasses jump. "She practically signed this kid's death warrant." "Easy, Bear," Rex cautioned, though his own expression mirrored the rage. He looked at Lily, a flicker of something akin to admiration in his stern eyes. "You did good, kid. Damn good." Lily looked up, a faint blush warming her cheeks at the unexpected praise. "So, what do we do, Rex?" Ace asked, his usual sardonic edge replaced by genuine concern. "We can't just sit on this." Rex leaned forward, forearms resting on the workbench. "No, we can't." He ran a hand over his chin, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "My gut tells me to go down there and tear the place apart. But that won't truly help these kids, not in the long run. And it'll just get us locked up, leaving Lily and the others with no one," Spike added, ever the pragmatist. He paused, then continued, a new light dawning in his eyes. "This is massive, Rex. Too big for us to tackle alone, even if we wanted to. This is federal territory." Rex met Spike's gaze, silent understanding passing between them. "You're thinking what I'm thinking?" Spike nodded slowly. "We need to involve the feds. Get this notebook into the right hands. The kind of hands that can really dismantle something like this." He glanced at Lily, then back at Rex. "And we need Lily with us. Her testimony, coupled with this." He gestured to the notebook. "That's unassailable." A murmur of agreement rippled through the club. The raw anger was now annealing into a cold, determined resolve. They were men of action, and this was the most critical action they could undertake. "The FBI," Snake confirmed, his voice firm. "They have the resources, the jurisdiction." Bear nodded, his earlier fury settling into a grim determination. "They'll believe her. They have to." Rex looked at each man, seeing the unwavering commitment reflected in their eyes. He then turned to Lily, his expression softening slightly. "Lily, are you willing to do that? To tell your story to them?" Lily looked around the circle of faces. These formidable men, who moments ago had seemed intimidating, now radiated an aura of protection. She saw their outrage, their resolve, and for the first time in a very long time, a sliver of hope bloomed within her. She thought of Michael and the others. She thought of the fear in their eyes. She met Rex's gaze, her small chin lifting fractionally. "Yes," she said, her voice small but clear, imbued with a nascent strength. "I will." Rex gave a curt nod. "All right, then. We move first thing in the morning. No chances. No risks. We go straight to them." He looked at his club. "This isn't just about protecting one kid anymore. This is about justice for every child lost to that woman. And we're going to get it." The air crackled with a new energy, a dangerous current of purpose. The motorcycle club, once a defiant symbol of independence, was now united in a mission far grander than themselves. They would ride not for glory, but for redemption, with a brave little girl and her meticulous notebook, leading the way into the heart of darkness they were determined to expose. At the FBI doors, the FBI field office loomed, an imposing monolith of gray concrete and tinted glass against the bruised afternoon sky. Its sterile, unyielding architecture felt like a stark contrast to the rumble of the motorcycles that idled at the curb, their chrome glinting dully in the fading light. Rex cut his engine, the sudden silence amplified by the building's oppressive stillness. Beside him, Lily's small hand tightened in his, her knuckles white. She was tucked between him and Hammer, the protective wall of their bodies a silent reassurance. The club members, a formidable phalanx of leather and denim, dismounted with a collective sigh of displaced energy. Their usual boisterous confidence was muted, replaced by a grim, unified purpose. Rex glanced down at Lily. Her face, usually a canvas of quiet observation, was etched with a fragile mix of apprehension and resolve. Her eyes, wide and luminous, darted from the building's entrance to his face, searching for reassurance. He squeezed her hand, a wordless promise of protection. "Ready, kid?" he rumbled, his voice softer than usual. She nodded, a slight tremor running through her. The notebook, her meticulously compiled testament, was clutched in her other hand, its worn cover a testament to countless hours of silent vigilance. It felt impossibly heavy now, the weight of every lost child, every whispered fear pressing down on her. But she knew, deep in her small, brave heart, that this was the only way. This was for them. The walk from the curb to the double-glass doors felt like an endless journey. Each click of Rex's heavy boots on the pavement seemed to echo the frantic beat of Lily's heart. The doors slid open, with a soft hiss revealing a brightly lit, impersonal lobby. A security guard, whose gaze lingered a moment too long on the assembled bikers, directed them to a waiting area. Minutes later, a woman emerged from a corridor, her stride purposeful. Agent Davis. She was tall, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail without overtly staring. Her dark suit was crisp, her demeanor professional, but there was a subtle current of weariness beneath her composed exterior, the kind born from dealing with the world's uglier truths. Her gaze swept over the group, pausing on Rex, then settling on Lily. A flicker of something akin to recognition, or perhaps a premonition, crossed her face. "Mr. O'Malley," she asked, her voice even, though a hint of curiosity colored her tone. Rex stepped forward, pulling Lily gently with him. "Agent Davis, this is Lily." He placed his large hand on Lily's shoulder, a clear statement of guardianship. "She has something for you." Lily, still clinging to Rex's hand, extended the notebook. Her small arm trembled, but her gaze met Agent Davis's directly, a silent plea for understanding. The notebook, which felt like an extension of her own heart, was offered with a quiet dignity that belied her age. Agent Davis took the book, her fingers brushing Lily's. The cover was scuffed, the pages slightly dog-eared. It looked innocuous, like any child's school journal. She opened it, her brow furrowing almost imperceptibly, as she saw the precise, almost calligraphic script. The silence in the waiting area stretched, thick and heavy. The club members, usually restless and prone to irreverent chatter, stood in an uncharacteristic quiet, their gazes fixed on Agent Davis. They understood the gravity of the moment, the profound truth held within those pages. Agent Davis's eyes scanned the first few entries. Dates, names, sparse descriptions. Then her gaze sharpened. A specific date, a foster child's name, a note about a late-night visitor, and a big brown van. Her thumb unconsciously traced the careful lines of Lily's handwriting. The innocence of the script, juxtaposed with the chilling content, created a dissonance that snagged at her professional composure. She turned a page, then another, her reading pace quickening. The casual observations began to coalesce into a pattern, a horrifying tapestry woven from neglect, disappearances, and transactions. Lily describes her foster mother receiving gifts after children leave, she murmured, more to herself than to the group. Her voice was low, thoughtful, carrying just a hint of disbelief. Then, a sharp intake of breath, as she read about the whispers in the dark, about new homes and new families, far away. Rex watched her, his expression grim. He knew what she was seeing, what she was feeling, the dawning horror of a truth too terrible to contemplate. He felt Lily's hand clench tighter in his, a testament to the fear that still gnawed at her, even as her bravery shone through. Agent Davis closed the notebook for a moment, her eyes rising to meet Lily's. Her gaze was no longer merely professional. It held a profound concern, a deep well of empathy. "Lily," she said, her voice gentle, "this is incredibly important." She paused, then reopened the book, her fingers already moving, to turn to a specific page she'd noted. "Let's go somewhere quieter. We have a lot to talk about." Her gaze swept across the assembled bikers. "And I think you all need to hear this." The journey had begun. The truth, meticulously documented by a child's brave hand, was finally in the hands of those who could act. The dangerous resolve had transformed into a dangerous journey, its path uncertain, but its purpose undeniably clear. The evidence unfolds. The hum of the fluorescent lights above did little to cut through the heavy silence that had fallen over the conference room. Agent Davis sat at the head of the table, Lily's worn notebook spread open before her. Each page, filled with meticulous, childlike script, was a punch to the gut. The initial shock had given way to a cold, steadied dread. She traced a finger over a column of dates, then over the corresponding names. Tommy Miller, 7 Ers, Shy, Loves Trains. Left Feb. 12. A few pages later. Sarah Jenkins, 5 Ers. Quiet, always drawing. Left Feb. 28. And beneath Sarah's name, a small, barely legible note. "Mrs. Gable got new pearl earrings." Davis felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The pattern, chillingly clear, was beginning to emerge. Lily, perched on a chair several feet away, watched her with wide, unblinking eyes. A quiet sentinel to the unfolding horror. Rex stood by the door, his imposing figure a silent promise of protection, while his club members waited in the hallway. Their presence a stark contrast to the sterile environment, yet oddly comforting in their unwavering support. Agent Davis? One of her junior agents. Miller ventured, his voice hushed. We've started cross-referencing the names. The initial search, it's not good. Davis nodded, her gaze still fixed on the notebook. Give me the rundown, Miller. Tommy Miller, Miller began, scrolling through a tablet. Reported runaway 2 weeks after he left Mrs. Gable's. No trace since? Sarah Jenkins. Same. Listed as a runaway 3 weeks after her departure? We're finding similar patterns for nearly 24 children on these first few pages. All from Mrs. Gable's foster home. All reported missing or runaways shortly after leaving her care. The room grew colder. Davis's jaw tightened. She flipped another page. Lily, what does this symbol mean? She pointed to a small, crudely drawn flower next to a child's name. Lily's voice was a soft whisper. That means Mrs. Gable said they were going to a special garden. She always smiled when she said that. A shiver ran down Davis's spine. The seemingly innocuous detail, filtered through a child's innocent understanding, now took on a sinister resonance. And these dates? Davis asked, pointing to a column Lily had labeled Gifts. That's when Mrs. Gable got new things, Lily explained, her voice gaining a touch more clarity. A new car, a new necklace, a big TV. Always after someone left. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. Mrs. Gable wasn't just neglecting children. She was orchestrating their disappearance. Her foster home was a revolving door, a carefully constructed facade for something far more insidious. Agent Davis pushed the notebook towards Miller. I want every name in this book flagged, every single one. Cross-reference them with missing persons reports, runaway databases, anything we have. Focus on children who spent time in Mrs. Gable's care. She turned to another agent, Chen. Chen, I need a deep dive into Mrs. Gable's finances. Every bank account, every asset, every transaction. I want to know where her money's coming from and where it's going. The FBI office, usually a hive of controlled activity, now pulsed with a new urgency. Agents moved with a grim determination, their faces reflecting the gravity of the information Lily had provided. The conference room transformed into an impromptu command center. Maps were pulled up on the large screens, pinning locations related to Mrs. Gable. Surveillance photos of the seemingly benign foster home flashed across one monitor, now imbued with a chilling significance. As the hours passed, the scope of the operation became terrifyingly clear. The disappearances weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a sophisticated, widespread network. Phone records, flagged transactions, and cross-referenced addresses began to paint a disturbing picture of connections reaching far beyond the small town. Mrs. Gable's foster home, once thought of as a sanctuary for vulnerable children, was in fact a crucial nexus, a funnel for victims into a dark and sprawling enterprise. Agent Davis felt a cold fury building within her. The meticulousness of Lily's documentation, the sheer volume of children listed, spoke to an operation of staggering proportions. The innocent details, the special gardens, and new gifts now screamed of monstrous deception. This wasn't just a local problem. It had federal fingerprints all over it. She looked at Lily, who sat quietly, watching the flurry of activity with a stoic resolve that belied her young age. The child had carried this burden, this horrifying knowledge, in silence because no one would listen. Now, an entire agency was listening, spurred into action by her courage and her careful, heartbreaking evidence. Lily, Agent Davis said, her voice soft but firm, you did an incredible thing. Because of you, we're going to find out exactly what happened to these children, and we're going to stop it. Lily offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of something akin to hope in her eyes. A hope that justice, finally, was within reach. The fight had only just begun, but the path was illuminated by a brave little girl and her worn, damning notebook, A New Dawn. The crisp morning air shattered with the roar of engines and the blare of sirens. A convoy of black SUVs, marked with the unmistakable lettering of the FBI, descended on the quiet suburban street where Mrs. Gable's house stood. Flashing blue and red lights painted the sleepy neighborhood in an urgent electric glow. Tactical agents, clad in dark gear, moved with synchronized precision, surrounding the property. Inside, the sudden violent pounding on the front door jarred Lily awake. She lay frozen in her bed, a tremor running through her small frame. Fear, a familiar companion, coiled in her stomach, but this time, it was different. This wasn't the fear of Mrs. Gable. This was the tremor of anticipation, of something finally happening. From her window, she saw a flurry of movement. agents pouring from vehicles, their faces grimly determined. The front door splintered inward, with a loud crash. "FBI! Clear the house!" a voice boomed, amplified by a bullhorn. Lily heard Mrs. Gable's shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic, followed by indignant shouts and the clatter of breaking pottery. Lily stayed still, her eyes wide, watching the unfolding chaos. She saw agents entering the rooms below, their movements swift and purposeful. Agent Davis, her face a mask of resolute concentration, directed teams around the perimeter, her voice calm amidst the escalating tension. "Secure the special garden first," she instructed one unit, referencing a coded entry from Lily's notebook. Another team was already moving towards the back of the house, where the fenced-off garden lay, its soil hiding secrets far more sinister than any root vegetable. Within minutes, the first child emerged, a boy no older than 7, blinking in the harsh morning light, wrapped in a fleece blanket by a kind-faced agent. Then another, a girl with matted hair, looking utterly bewildered. The operation spiraled outwards, a massive coordinated effort stretching across multiple states. Lily's meticulous notes had provided a roadmap to a sprawling network. The new gifts and special gardens were quickly revealed to be safe houses, drop-off points, and even hidden compartments within seemingly ordinary vehicles. The FBI, armed with undeniable evidence, moved with unprecedented speed. Hours later, the local news channels were ablaze. Helicopter footage showed a stream of children being led from various properties, their faces varying from shell-shocked to cautiously hopeful. A reporter, her voice tight with emotion, narrated, "This morning, in a sweeping operation spanning 3 states, the FBI dismantled one of the largest child trafficking rings in recent history. Dozens of children, many of them foster children, have been rescued." The screen then flashed to a grainy photo of Mrs. Gable's house, now cordoned off with yellow tape. Sources indicate that the breakthrough came from the extraordinary courage of a single, unnamed foster child, whose detailed observations in a war notebook provided the crucial evidence needed to expose this horrifying operation. Lily, now safely ensconced in a temporary shelter with other rescued children, watched the news report from a small television in the common room. A shy smile touched her lips. She wasn't unnamed to herself. She knew who she was. Meanwhile, Mrs. Gable, her usually impeccably coiffed hair now disheveled, her eyes darting frantically, sat in a sterile interrogation room. The sweet, grandmotherly facade had crumbled, revealing a brittle, terrified woman. Agent Davis, her expression cool and unyielding, placed Lily's notebook on the table between them. "Mrs. Gable," Agent Davis began, her voice devoid of any warmth, "we have quite a bit to discuss. Let's start with the new gifts you received on October 12th, followed by their departure to the special garden on October 15th. She tapped a page in the notebook. "We have corroborating testimony from multiple rescued children, details matching Lily's observations, and forensic evidence from your property. Your carefully constructed life, Mrs. Gable, is over." Mrs. Gable's face drained of color. She looked at the notebook, then at Agent Davis, a flicker of something that might have been recognition, or perhaps just dawning horror in her eyes. The game was up. The carefully spun web of deception had been untangled by a child's quiet bravery. The silence in the room stretched, heavy with the weight of her crimes. Justice, slow but inevitable, had finally arrived. Lily's new beginning? The aroma of lavender and fresh-baked bread imbued the air, a welcome shift from the sterile, faintly metallic tang that had defined Mrs. Gable's house. Lily's fingers traced the floral pattern on the quilt, a soft, yielding expanse that cradled her without a creak or sag. Bright, unfiltered sunlight poured through the window, framed by cheerful yellow curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the afternoon. This wasn't another way station, another transient stop on a circuit of strangers. This was truly home. Sarah, her new foster mother, possessed a laugh like wind chimes and a smile that radiated warmth. She'd outlined the household guidelines simply: be kind, be honest, and if you need anything, just ask. No subtle caveats, no veiled threats, no demands for silence underscored her words. Sarah and Tom, her husband, treated Lily as an individual, not a predicament to be managed. Later that afternoon, after a lunch of homemade chicken noodle soup, Lily gravitated to her new bedroom. The walls, painted a calming pale blue, hosted a small bookshelf, laden with colorful children's books. She settled cross-legged on the plush carpet, clutching a familiar, well-worn object, her notebook. Its cover, once a dull brown, now seemed to emanate a quiet energy. She ran her fingers over the faded cardboard before slowly opening it. The pages, filled with her meticulous handwriting, lay before her. Special gardens, she read silently. New gifts, Mr. Henderson. The van with no windows. Each entry, a chilling fragment of a nightmare, no longer held the power to paralyze. Instead, they stood as monuments to her bravery, to her unwavering conviction that truth would ultimately prevail. She recalled the fear that had driven her to write, the frantic impulse to document every detail, every hushed conversation, every suspicious vehicle. Now, those scrupulously recorded observations formed a chronicle of courage, a testament to the lives she had safeguarded. A faint smile touched Lily's lips. The names, once harbingers of terror, were now just ink on a page, shorn of their potency. The dates, once markers of impending dread, were now simply dates, a historical record. This notebook, once a bulwark against encroaching darkness, had transformed into a trophy of light. It served not as a reminder of what she had endured, but of what she had transcended. She closed the notebook, a sense of quiet triumph settling over her. It wouldn't be secreted away under a loose floorboard or tucked beneath a wobbly dresser. It belonged on her bookshelf, a silent guardian amidst tales of dragons and princesses, a memento of a different kind of hero. A gentle rap at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Sarah's kind face appeared in the frame. Everything all right in here, sweet pea? Lily nodded, a genuine smile blossoming. Yes, thank you. Sarah's gaze softened, resting on the notebook in Lily's lap. That looks important, she remarked, her voice devoid of prying curiosity. Only warmth. It is, Lily whispered, a newfound confidence resonating in her tone. It's how I helped. Sarah simply nodded, her eyes twinkling. I can tell. You're a very special girl, Lily. Later, nestled on a beanbag chair in the living room, Lily became lost in the escapades of a plucky rabbit detective. The words on the page danced, a welcome immersion into a world where good invariably triumphed, where enigmas were resolved, and where everyone found safety. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds, the rustle of Tom turning pages in his own book, these were the cadences of peace. A lightness suffused her chest, a profound weight lifted that she hadn't realized she still carried. The relentless vigilance, the dread of exposure, the desperate hope that someone would finally heed her, all had dissipated like morning mist. She could simply exist. She could read, she could play, she could dream unburdened by the shadows of Mrs. Gable's house. When Sarah called her for dinner, a simple meal of spaghetti and meatballs, Lily didn't hesitate. She didn't scan the room for threats, didn't wonder if her portion was smaller than others, didn't brace for an unexpected reprimand. She simply ate, savoring each bite, the taste of normalcy, of affection. As darkness descended, painting the sky in deep indigo, Lily lay in her bed, the soft quilt drawn to her chin. Moonlight filtered through the yellow curtains, casting a gentle glow on her bookshelf. The notebook, cradled between a worn copy of Charlotte's Web and a vibrant picture book about outer space, seemed to hum by ease with quiet satisfaction. No longer a burden, it was now a testament to her resilience, a beacon of hope, and a silent pledge of new beginnings. Her story, etched within those pages, would continue to inspire, a whisper of courage against unspeakable darkness, ensuring no child would suffer in silence again. Lily closed her eyes, a peaceful smile gracing her face, finally free